Hi everybody, I'm Bree the Plant Lady, and today I want to take you on a tour of my Prunus mume collection. Prunus mumes are also known as the Japanese flowering apricot, and they are a fabulous, fragrant, winter blooming tree. This is totally normal for them to be in full bloom in January here in central North Carolina, Zone 7. Now, I've been growing Prunus mumes for almost 20 years. They are a collector's tree. They aren't always very common to find, but they are a really, really wonderful plant. And I wish they were more available because honestly, everybody should grow this. Now, they will grow best in full sun, but you can grow them in part shade. Just count on them not flowering quite as well and not developing as dense of a branching structure. Now, according to Google, they are actually hardy in zones 6 through 9. I think they're totally worth trying if you live in zone 6. But again, finding them at your local garden center is going to be your biggest challenge. I used to specialize in propagating these from cuttings when I worked at Camellia Forest. Unfortunately, they aren't still propagating them. And, it used to be really nice because I could just say, like, just order online and Camellia Forest would ship to you. So now you actually have to really do a lot more work to find them. But when you do find them, buy them. Trust me. To get a cultivar specific, it has to be asexually propagated, and they are traditionally done from cuttings. They're not the easiest plant to propagate, which is why they aren't more common. However, I have found that they root really easily on softwood, typically stuck like the end of April, beginning of May. But that's a really busy time in the nursery industry, and a lot of people aren't propagating at that time, which again leads to the reason that they aren't more available in the general trade. Now, you can get seed-grown Prunus mumes, and that's actually what I was selling last year at my spring and fall open garden. And that's because in 2020, we had a really mild winter and they flowered, and we didn't have a late frost, and they all set fruit. And then the fruit fell to the ground, germinated, we dug them up, potted them, and that's actually what we distributed. When they're seed grown, you don't know what color they will be because they're open pollinated. Of course, growing from seed is how you breed. So the varieties that I'm going to show you, which I have 5 of, all were grown from seed, but then asexually propagated to maintain their genetics, to be exactly what they are. So without further ado, I am going to turn the camera around and I want to show you the 5 different varieties that I have growing, and they're all at different flowering stages and they're all different colors. So I hope you'll be inspired by this video, and I hope that you will be able to find some Prunus mumes to include in your garden. Right here off my back porch is a fabulous variety called Matsubara Red. And it really is pink, but in the nursery industry, we sometimes like to lie about flower color. It's really magnificent. Obviously, you can see that. Tons of flowers open. The bees love it. And it's a little cool still, but there are bees on the plant. And that's why when I say something is open pollinated, the bees are moving from tree to tree and they're moving pollen from plant to plant. So a seed-grown plant might have, pollen from several different varieties. And that's why you won't know what color it will be until it actually flowers. Now this plant, I actually propagated this from cuttings. I stuck the cuttings in 2010. So it's 2023 now. So this is a 13-year-old plant. Let me move out here so you can see how large the tree actually is. This is every bit 25 foot tall. When I planted it, it was in a 1-gallon pot, just so you have a reference point. They do grow pretty rapidly, and though they're often considered short-lived, here we are 13 years since propagating and no disease issues, and it's a really reliable plant. So I just this always makes January super special, in my opinion. Having a tree in full bloom that's also really fragrant. It smells like big red gum. You know, it's very cinnamon scented, and they're great branches to bring inside to use for cut flower arrangements. And oh, look, there's a sweet little bird up there. The birds actually also seem to be attracted to the flowers. I don't know whether they gather nectar. I don't know enough about birds, but you can see there, I've been watching this happen on various Prunus mumes over the years. And of course, if it's a plant that attracts bees and birds, you've basically got me hooked. So here we have Prunus mume Josephine, and you can see this is a little bit later in flowering. It's just starting to open. This is a very soft pink, really more of a white flower. And as we get closer, you'll see, you know, there's tons of flower buds still to open. So this is going to continue flowering for quite a few more weeks still. Get close up on those flowers. And again, this is a same age. All of my Prunus mumes are the same age. They were all propagated from cuttings in 2010, planted in, I think, 2011. So you can see the caliper is quite significant. And I do this, I've got an awkward growing habit. I'll acknowledge that. You can see this has a lot of water sprouts, and that's actually caused by doing hard winter pruning. So these are in the Rosaceae family. And rosaceous plants are better to be pruned in the summer because then they won't sucker and flush out awkward branches. I didn't realize that. I was cutting the branches in the winter because I wanted to use them for cut flower arrangements inside, but I caused this really awkward branching habit. So this summer, I'm just gonna come in and clean this up. You know, I think some rejuvenating pruning would benefit this tree and probably all of my trees. I'm not a great pruner. It's not that I don't know how, it's that I don't really enjoy doing it. But I definitely want to maintain this plant long term, and I want it to have as graceful of a form as possible. And right now it's looking pretty awkward, but you know, I can ignore awkwardness for the fabulous floral display. All right, here we have Prunus mume Pink Panther. And you can see this one is just barely starting to bloom right now. This is always my latest flowering Prunus mume. Now, we did some really hard pruning on this last summer when I still had COVID. And I remember asking David, I just need you to cut 2 branches. Like, you can kind of see where one branch was. It was like half the tree. And he just laughed and thought I was the most ridiculous person, saying it'll just take like 2 minutes. Of course, it took a lot longer than 2 minutes. But, you know, I wanted to open up the canopy and give some of these other trees an opportunity to fill out. And this plant, I think, looks significantly better as a result of that pruning. But you also notice there's no sort of suckering or water sprout branches. And that's because we did the pruning in the summer and not the winter. So this is a perfect example of what you should do versus literally what I did over there a few years ago, which is not what you should do. So I've actually given myself more work by pruning at the wrong season. So remember, always prune your Rosaceae plants during the active growing season. I'll definitely be sharing more updates of Pink Panther as the season continues. So be sure to subscribe and tune in for the weekly garden tours. And here we have a weeping form called Bridal Veil. This was actually introduced by Camellia Forest, just like Pink Panther was. And this is a really elegant, sort of soft pink to white, semi-double flower form with nice weeping habit. Now this is of course the wrong place for the tree. It's in direct competition with a live oak, but I don't care. I'm gonna keep it. Obviously can't transplant it at this stage. This is one that I wish I had put out more like in that shrub border where I wouldn't have to do as much pruning on it, because the branches here like to come through and make it hard to walk under. Last summer we did a significant pruning job on it, and again you can see no suckering or water sprouts because we pruned at the right season. This is a really beautiful plant. Again, not the best placement in my garden, but with a slightly more thoughtful landscape design, this could be a really incredible specimen. Now the tree that quite literally stops all of my neighbors in their tracks year after year is Prunus mume Bonita. And this is always the first one to bloom in my collection. It's out here in the middle of my front yard. Again, full sun is best so that you get as many flowers as possible. And this is basically like a Pepto-Bismol pink. When you pull into the neighborhood, you can see this, and it looks like a cotton candy tree. And obviously lots of pollinators, specifically honeybees, really like Prunus mumes. And this tree has a terrible form. It was like a plant that in the nursery had actually spent quite a few years on its side, like blown over by the wind. I rescued it. This is one that was actually a bit larger. I think this was in a 3 gallons. It was probably propagated in like 2007. And I've already admitted to y'all, I'm not a very dedicated pruner. Over the years, I've tried to make it look better. Well, you can see that not only do the bees love it, but birds love to make nests here. I've got 2 birds' nests in this tree, and it's just such a, I don't know, it's just such a fantastic plant. I really wish that this was more available so that everybody could just have one of these like a dogwood. Honestly, in the big scheme of things, these are easier to cultivate than dogwoods. I think they have fewer disease problems. So if you ask at your garden center, ask. Honestly, the nursery industry will not change until there is consumer demand. Many of you might not know my background, but I started my career as a plant propagator and, specialized in tree and shrub production, both wholesale and retail mail order. And so I know a lot about how the nursery industry operates. And if there isn't guaranteed consumer demand, wholesale growers aren't going to include random plants in their inventories. So here's the thing. To constitute change in the green industry, it actually has to start with consumers. You need to go to the garden center and ask for something like a Prunus mume that they might not have in stock. And then those buyers will go to the wholesale growers and say, hey, we've had a whole bunch of people asking for this thing. can you start producing it for us so that then it can get into the chain, so that ultimately these great plants that are sort of in this collector's bubble will start to become more normalized. But it starts with consumers asking. And if you don't ask, they're never gonna change. You're gonna see the same 20 plants over and over again, because that's how the industry works. So I hope more than anything, this video will inspire you to wanna grow some Prunus mumes and then go and bother all the people at your garden centers so that great plants like this will start to become more normalized, and we'll actually get to see and enjoy them in landscapes in zones 6 through 9 as a commonplace. Well, I appreciate all of you tuning in, and I'm wishing you the very best. Thanks for watching, everybody.